And hello good people of the internet, it is I, Tommy Kelly, and this is Adventures in Woo Woo, and welcome to a golf club, Ballymac Golf Club. I've done a number of videos here, but usually down on the trail near the water, but I've also done a video here before, in this exact spot. I was trying to do a video over in the trees, and the universe sent me on a bit of an adventure this morning to try and find my wind muff, my microphone that I had lost, and that made me extremely angry. But it's kind of semi-related to what I want to talk about in this video. So there's definitely a lesson in it. It's also quite windy, as is the norm here. Glad I found my wind muff, and there's someone cutting the grass, as is the case every time we're here. But again, this is part of what I want to talk about. Recently on the podcast, I talked about an experience I have where divinity showed up and had a few words to tell me about the nature of reality. It's on the Tommy and Spud Talk About podcast. I'll link to it in the show description. And we're not going over the whole thing again because I'm going to write a blog post about it. It essentially was kind of trying to explain the nature of reality, and the question I have is, why is it like this? You know, why is there such deep sadness? Why is there such deep sorrow? Why is there such struggle? You know, why does it feel like that? And the answer kind of was, in very plain terms, was because this is the nature of the place in which we find ourselves. And by unpacking that kind of notion with Spud on the podcast and my own kind of machinations in my own head, it's very similar, I suppose, to what the Buddha talked about, or the Buddha, in that he says that life is dukkha. Now, dukkha has many translations, and all of them are terrible, by all accounts. I don't know, I don't speak the language. But people who can say all the translations into English are a bit terrible, a bit naff, just not pointing to the exact thing. But it usually gets translated as life is shit, or life is struggle, or life is stress, or life is bad, I suppose, or any of these kind of things. But actual dukkha is points to the axle on a wheel being slightly off. So it just means things aren't running smoothly. There's something just not right. The wheel isn't going round properly. Alan Watts says that it's the opposite to the word sukha, which means sweet. So there's an implication that there's a bitterness as well to it. But again, I'm relying on second-hand sources for this because I don't speak the actual language. So what he's pointing to is there's this kind of notion that there is something, just a constant, always pervading sense that things just aren't the way we want them to be, or just not right, or they're just not fixed, they're just a bit broken, or they're just, if only they could be slightly different, things would be much better. And of course he says that the reason, he says there is a way out of this, of course, and the reason that it's the struggle within it is that we cling to it. We have a desire for things to be different, and it's the desire itself that causes the pain and the suffering. And then, you know, in order to get out of it, you have to, you know, stop desiring these things, which is the catch-22 of the desire to stop desiring is clearly a desire. But so he has the middle way, the balancing of not any of the extremes. But I suppose what the divinity was trying to say to me, or at least whatever it was that appeared to me, whether it be a part of my own mind or God himself, irrelevant, the same thing anyway, is that this is the nature of this place, is to be like this, and with the struggle, with the happiness, with the bliss, with the sadness, and all of these things, and kind of in one sense looking for an answer for that is like, say, it's like the nature of rain is to rain. But why? Because that's what rain does. Or the nature of the sun is to shine. Why? Because that's the nature of the sun. And while that's not fully satisfactory, it's enough for the moment. But there is a whole pointing to a whole kind of greater thing around it that I kind of noticed. I was talking to a friend of mine who will name nameless. It's not my story to tell, but I'm going to tell his story anonymously, so I can't tell it. And he was kind of saying that he pointed out that one of his kind of recent discoveries about himself is that he had a deep-seated root kind of lying around in the back of his mind that at some point in his life he was going to get everything he wanted, that it would all work out, all fall into place. And that his desires would eventually be met sometime in the future. And I was kind of going, that's interesting, yeah. And then I noticed that I also have that. I have that the whole time. I have that with regard to certain relationships, or certain work things, or certain projects, or certain things about myself. There's kind of feeling in me that at some point all of that's going to be fixed. All of it's going to work out. All of it's going to, I'll get everything in its right place. everything will be in its right box. There'll be no suffering anymore. I'll have sorted it all out. And when I really investigated, I did feel like that was something that was going to happen at some point in my life. And then I went, oh no, because that's clearly not going to happen. And so there's that kind of quote that comes back, I suppose, the John Lennon one of life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And it's become very kind of true, or at least the realization of that's very true, is that there's an expectation within me. There's still a need that needs to be fulfilled to have all my needs fulfilled. And a kind of thinking that will happen. And it's divinity then coming down, or the Buddha 2,500 years ago saying that no, life is dukkha. That's not going to be it. It's because the nature of this place is to always be not harmonious. It's the polarity of things. Polarity only from one sense. These like joy and sadness, or these things are the same thing. It's just like a pendulum swing. So, but we have a kind of dual notion around them, that they're two separate things, but they're the same thing: happiness and sadness. And that even if you get your current to-do list finished, there's always going to be something else that's always there, and it's the nature of this world. And you can see this not even on a personal scale for me, or for yourself possibly. You can see it in a world scale, that there's always a looming apocalypse. There's always something that needs to be fixed about the world. There's always something to be worked on. And if we could just get this one thing sorted, if we could just cure, poverty, or we could just stop war, or we could, fix the climate crisis, then everything would be great. And we all sort it, and everyone will be happy, and all go home and can all, get back to our actual life, to the thing that we're meant to be doing, rather than these problems that are in our way, that we just need to get sorted so that we can return to life. I'm kind of looking at it over through my own life, and being Gen X, I could make an argument that I'm a millennial, but none of those things make a difference. I'm clearly Gen X. I was born in 1977. And in my life, I've had any amount of apocalypses that I have survived. From the threat of absolutely terrifying nuclear war in the 80s, which went back before then anyway. My dad had that in the 60s. Which absolutely devastated me as a kid, terrified me. I was like constantly thinking that a nuclear bomb was going to land on me the whole time. Really, absolutely, I was going to say ruin my childhood, but had a huge kind of influence on my childhood and building fear. Of course, that didn't happen. The Cold War ended. Possibly. It ostensibly ended, let's say that. And then we had, what's the next apocalypse? Well, you had the Gulf War, of course, the first one. You had many sequels, of course, and that I was just gone into secondary school, and that again was terrifying because that felt like the end of the world too, You had, well, I suppose that coming out of like 9/11 and stuff like that, but you also had Y2K before that, where planes were going to fall out of the sky, where the economy was going to crash because all the computers in Wall Street and all the financial institutions were going to blow up or something. Of course, that didn't happen. That world didn't end. The constant war in the Middle East that, at any time could turn into World War III, or is World War III, whatever way you want to look at it. I'm sure from one side of it, it certainly feels like World War III. Just us in the West feel that we're somehow the good guys in all of this. Then you have, what happened next? Then you have the Mayan apocalypse, 2012. There's all the Nostradamus things. There is the current climate crisis that's going to destroy us all. Any amount of these things, and I'm missing out for you because I rattled off 20 in my head earlier on. That's certainly not 20. But there's only so many apocalypses you can go through in your life where you might go, maybe the nature of this place is to always have a looming apocalypse. Maybe this is part of what it is. And arguments could be made that it wasn't always the case. But even going back 2,000 years, when Jesus arrived in the scenes, his disciples, the apostles, felt the apocalypse were happening in their lifetime, and every Christian has since. And I'm sure you go back further than that, and people had that kind of general thought that we always seem to be living in the end times. So even on a kind of a global scale, there is this notion that there's something to be fixed, and when we fix it, everything will be great. And we have the kind of feeling that we will fix it, okay? That it will be sorted. And climate change probably will be sorted. I'm climate positive. In the same way ozone was, going to kill us all, and then we fixed it. And perhaps there will be some time in the future where we won't be able to fix it. But my point about it is that even when we do fixes, there's going to be more challenges, there's going to be more things to worry about. There's always going to be the looming apocalypse in your life and in the grand scheme of things in society, and you know, as that kind of pendulum stuff from a reality transurfing point of view echoes all out. And there was one thing that kind of happened in the notion of a particular relationship I had, where I kind of really noticed that I was waiting for it to be the relationship that I wanted it to be, and felt that at some point it would be. And in that, I was kind of pushing and melding and moulding and trying to make it malleable enough that I could turn it into this kind of relationship that I wanted, instead of realising the relationship for what it was, and that this is the relationship it is. And there's not a kind of point where it's going to be the perfect relationship where I have it all sorted out. And that was kind of a very eye-opening experience, to just realise that all of these things that we're trying to battle with are probably ultimately, not that we shouldn't try and improve ourselves, that we shouldn't try and expand and create and move out or whatever, but the kind of notion that we're going to get it all solved, that there's going to be some point in the future where it's all done and we do it all, where we've achieved everything we want to achieve, where all our relationships are harmonious, and etc, 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 is just not the nature of this place. And it would be quite boring in one way if it was, because you know, you're just sitting around going, well, I've done everything, you know. But possibly, like, I mean, you hear of some people who are kind of stuck in their ways for years and do the same thing. But I mean, there's a boredom that creeps into, and then there's routine, and they're scared of going out of it. So when I was doing this video, when I was coming down here, as I say, I lost the wind mic for the thing, and I was kind of got really annoyed, because I was kind of going, why would that have happened? You know, on this fucking planet, this thing, there's always something. Realising a part of my mind was going, yeah, this is what you're going to talk about in this video, you know. But I was like, really, like, it seemed like there's no need for that to happen. There's no lesson that I'm going to learn in that. It just seemed to be something that happened just to annoy me, to poke at me. And it's this kind of thing I've talked about a million times before. It's this notion of the victim mentality, that life is out to get me or something, that I very much realised born out of trauma, and I was, in a sense, a protective measure at one point, but now it needs to be curbed or whatever. But it's an interesting thing then, that when I sat down, started cutting the grass again, I was going, what? Why is it just as I go to record this video, does the noise happen? Then it threatened to rain. And I was going, because it's the nature of this place for that to happen. And that's not, I want to stress that I'm not saying it's the nature of the place is to be shitty, but it's the nature of this place to be always in that kind of thing. And there's never going to be a point when everything is perfect and you get everything you want. Because that seems to be that the nature, why it's like that, is that it's to encourage creativity, movement, evolution, to move forward, to expand. And you can't expand or be creative in a vacuum or in stasis, or when you're stagnant, you're the least kind of creative. And I don't know if that kind of answers why there's so much cruelty and sadness and hardship in life. I'm not convinced in that. That seems still, from my kind of lesser perspective, to be, I don't know, not fair still, or that it seems unwarranted or unneeded, and it seems needlessly cruel. For if it's just the universe experience itself, or if it's just a push to evolution or creativity, it's, you know, or it's just trying to, you know, you can't have the massive bliss without the massive pain. And I don't know, I've had many bliss experiences, or absolute bliss, coming from my meditation practice, or insights or awakenings, what I've had, but none of them are equivalent to the deep despair that I felt at times, which in one sense could give you hope, because you would kind of say that, well, then there is an equivalency of that, and I just haven't achieved it or seen it or allowed it. So I'm open for that. So while I don't think I have all the answers, or I'm aware of all the things going on, having the understanding that I'm always going to be in a place of stasis, that I'm always going to be a place of movement, where things aren't always going to be the way I want them, that I'm not going to fix my life in totality. We're not going to fix humanity. We're not going to fix this earth in totality and then have a real life, and then it'll be all what we want. This is it, where we are now, right this moment, with all the things going on, with all the looming apocalypses, with all the inner kind of wants, needs, desires, with all the things we're working on, with all what we want to achieve, with all our shitty relationships, with all our brilliant relationships, with all our absolute heart expanding moments of touch, you know, when you get touched by divinity, or when you see, you know, your child happy, or all of these bliss experience, all of these things right this moment is what it is. And we're not, well, maybe you have a better, maybe you will do it, but I would suggest not. We're not going to fix it all, and it's not going to be a point where you get everything done and then your real life will start. And I think there's a kind of a feeling in it from talking to people about this kind of stuff. I think there is that kind of notion. And this is a good thing, because it means it takes the pressure off. You can relax in it. You're never going to get all the things done. You're never going to fix it all. And that's okay, because that's the nature of this place, is to constantly or always be in this kind of a situation. And where you find yourself now is where you're always going to be. So unless you can kind of change your mind around it, or surrender to it, or stop clinging to it, or stop wanting things to be different, which again is not to say that you shouldn't go out and achieve your things and be creative. It's just to allow it and to understand that this is how it's always going to be, and to start to try to become okay with that. And that's what I'm trying to do. To be okay with the guy cutting his grass ruining my video and the sound, which no one probably can hear. To be okay with knowing that my relationships are as they are, and that I can work on them or I cannot work on them, but they're never going to be exactly as I want them to be, because they can't, because we're different people, and you know, we're growing in different things. That the world is always going to be a scary place, that there's always going to be inequality in places, or things that we need to work on, that there will always be a looming apocalypse that we have to be fearful of. And maybe realising that that's not going to go away is just something we can accept about the nature of the place in which we find ourselves. So it's an ongoing kind of look into this, and I would like to know what you think about all of this. Is the world solvable? Is all your life problems or challenges solvable? Or how you feel about the topic in general. Does it take a bit of pressure off you, thinking that you won't get everything squared away? Yeah, so just your general thoughts about it. So, good people of the internet, may your best days be ahead, but may you be present in the moment, realising that even in your best days, that your best days are now, and they're not in the past, they're not in the futures, because it's always going to be this, who you are in this moment. And that's a wonderful thing, not a bad thing. So be well, and I'll see you all next time.